It's 6:19 a.m. in the Caribbean Sea, 140 miles north of Venezuela. The USS Gerald R. Ford was slicing through calm waters when two dots appeared on the horizon, cutting toward her formation like knives in the sunlight. They weren't pleasure planes. They were fast, and they were closing. On the flight deck, sailors paused mid-routine as the sound of distant engines shattered the morning calm. The air shimmered, heat bending the light, as two Venezuelan K-8 attack jets burst through the haze, barely 2,000 feet above the water. No warning, no radio call, just aggression. They banked hard across the carrier's bow. A buzz meant to intimidate. But intimidation only works when the target reacts. The Ford didn't. From the bridge, the commanding officer watched through binoculars, unflinching. "Maintain course," he said. The Venezuelan lead jet pulled into a steep climb, afterburners flaring, trailing smoke that caught the dawn light like fire. The second followed, wings rocking. The move was too dangerous, too low, too fast, and far too close to a 100,000-ton nuclear carrier whose radar systems could track a tennis ball at 40 miles. Down in the Combat Information Center, the Ford's air controllers were already watching every second on the live feeds. Their screens painted the truth in infrared. Empty hardpoints. No weapons. This wasn't an attack run. It was theater, the military version of a dare. But here's the thing about dares at sea. One miscalculation, one slip in judgment, and you're not just buzzing a carrier. You're provoking a superpower. At 0621 hours, the jets turned back toward the Venezuelan coast. For a moment, it looked like it was over, but it wasn't, because 2 minutes later, the radar picture changed. And what happened next would turn a simple flyby into an international incident. Inside the Combat Direction Center, the lights were dim. The air was heavy with focus. Radar scopes glowed pale green across the wall of screens. Every operator already knew the tracks, two Venezuelan K-8s, but now something didn't fit. "Combat, we've got a second radar return. New vector bearing 217, high speed and climbing." Another pair, 4 contacts total, heading straight for the Ford strike group. The watch officer leaned in. "Plotted, confirm IFF." "Negative IFF, no response to hails." The room fell quiet, except for the hum of consoles. But nobody panicked. They had trained for this 100 times. Above deck, Air Wing 8 snapped into motion. 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets were prepped for launch. Yellow shirts waved them forward. The catapult crews crouched into position. Hornet 1, wing spread, trim set, takeoff. Thumbs up. The shooter dropped his hand, and a blur of metal and sound ripped off the bow. The island tower tracked both Hornets as they climbed into formation, banking left toward the incoming radar pings. Their task was simple: intercept, identify, and de-escalate if possible. Down below, the operations officer watched the big screen. The range was closing fast. "Bridge to combat. Recommend tightening the escort screen. Bring destroyers Mason and Thomas Hudner forward." "Approved. Maintain speed and heading." The Ford didn't flinch. It didn't turn. To the untrained eye, it looked like provocation. To the Navy, it was posture. The unspoken message of American carriers for decades. We don't move for noise. The Hornets were climbing through 15,000 feet, and what they were about to see would confirm this encounter was no accident. At altitude, sunlight struck the Hornets like fire on metal. Their engines howled against the Caribbean air as they pushed east, streaking toward the unknown. The lead pilot, call-sign Viper 1, scanned his radar display. 4 solid returns, spacing tight, altitude rising. "Control, Viper 1. Confirm bandits. 4 contacts bearing 217, Angels 16. Copy, Viper 1. Positive ID. Venezuelan K-8s. Weapon status. Rules of engagement. Defensive only." "Roger that. We'll keep it clean." Below them, the USS Gerald R. Ford was a speck on the water, flanked by her destroyers in a perfect diamond formation. The carrier's SPY-3 radar painted the entire sky with precision, feeding every metric, speed, altitude, and vector straight into the Hornet's cockpit data links. Ahead, the two lead K-8s burst through a thin cloud layer, contrails slicing the blue sky. Viper 1 to contact. Identify yourself immediately. You are approaching a U.S. carrier group operating in international airspace. Static. Then a voice, thick with accent. U.S. aircraft. You are violating Bolivarian territory. You will turn away now. The Venezuelans cut across the Hornet's nose at just under 400 knots. One passed so close that Viper 1's helmet display flashed. Proximity alert. Watch your spacing, his wingman called. Viper 1 tightened his grip. We're not here to dance, boys. Just watch the show. Back on the Ford, every radar captured it in real time. Flight paths crossing within seconds of collision. Bridge to combat. Venezuelan aircraft executing unsafe maneuvers. Copy that. Maintain calm posture. No course change. One thing was clear now. This wasn't a mistake. It was bait. At 17,000 feet, the two Super Hornets shadowed the Venezuelan formation like wolves trailing a reckless pack. The sky was bright but tense. Thin clouds slid beneath them, the Caribbean stretching endless blue below. On Viper 1's FLIR screen, the K-8s drifted closer together, tightening formation. No missiles, but open hardpoints glinted under the sun. Control. They're crossing into our flight path again. Distance 800 meters. Copy. Maintain shadow posture. Record everything. The E-2D Hawkeye circling high above fed its radar picture directly into the Hornets' helmets. Every move, every deviation was cataloged. Below, the carrier's crew remained silent, watching the data unfold like a live chess match. Then one Venezuelan jet banked sharply left, breaking formation. The maneuver was fast, aggressive, and dangerously low, straight across Viper 2's nose. The American pilot's tone stayed calm. Ford control, contact just executed a proximity pass. Range 200 meters. Below decks, the Combat Direction Center tracked every angle. SPY-3 radar swept the sky, plotting the jets in perfect digital clarity. On the big board, the distance dropped to 6 miles from the carrier. Bridge to combat. Recommend alerting CRAM to standby. Affirmative. Do not engage. The K-8s banked again, closing tighter, almost too tight. The next pass would bring them within seconds of disaster. And this time, someone was going to make a huge mistake. Sudsik 32 hours. Inside the USS Gerald R. Ford's Combat Information Center, every console glowed with precise calm. Operators tracked 4 red icons weaving through the sky above the blue outline of the strike group. On the bridge, silence held. No yelling, no chaos, just controlled focus. Contacts now within 12 miles. A radar tech called out. Speed holding high subsonic. Copy, the tactical action officer replied. CRAM to warm standby. CWIS manual mode. Above deck, sailors glanced skyward. They couldn't see the jets clearly, but they could feel the tension. Every vibration through the deck plates, every coded message over the ship's comms. The Ford held steady at 20 knots, north-northwest. The destroyers Thomas Hudner and Mason tightened their screen, forming a steel wall ahead of the carrier. Electronic warfare suites were active, quietly jamming enemy sensors, just enough to muddy any targeting radar. On the flight deck, the air crew stayed in motion. Refueling hoses snapped, deck handlers flashed hand signals, and launch crews remained ready for a second scramble if needed. Nobody panicked. This was routine, and that was what made it unnerving. Inside the Combat Information Center, a calm voice finally broke the silence. Bridge to combat. Contacts now 8 miles and still closing. The Ford's captain stepped closer to the central console, eyes locked on the radar screen. Maintain heading. Do not alter speed. It wasn't stubbornness, it was doctrine. A U.S. carrier does not yield under pressure. The captain's words carried across the bridge. If we move for every jet that postures, the sea stops respecting the flag. Outside, the K-8s continued their approach, dipping low enough for their shadows to ripple across the ocean. And then, one of them dove. The Venezuelan lead jet rolled inverted at barely 1,000 feet and plunged straight toward the carrier group. The second followed close, cutting through the sky like a blade. From the Ford's bridge, it looked reckless, an intimidation run pushed far too close to the edge. Bridge to combat. Contacts now within 5 miles. Altitude dropping fast. Below decks, the Phalanx Sea-Whiz turret slewed automatically. Its 20mm barrel tracked the lead aircraft. System sensors detected movement faster than any human eye could blink. The only thing keeping it from firing was a silent command. Stand by. In the sky, Viper 1 and Viper 2 locked their helmets onto the Venezuelans, cameras recording every second through the canopy. The American pilot could see the other man's face. Visor glinting, jaw tight, hands trembling on the stick. Ford control. They're coming in hot. Range 1.2 miles. Copy. Hold your line. Do not escalate. The first K-8 roared over the destroyer Mason's bow, engines screaming, wake turbulence rolling off its wings. The shockwave slammed into the sea like thunder, rocking the ship. Then, zero clearance. Ford Tower, we've got unsafe maneuvering, Viper 2 shouted. That's a near miss. Maintain discipline, came the calm, precise response. The Hornets did not react. No radar locks, no counter moves. They simply slid behind the Venezuelans, shadowing them like ghosts. On board the Ford, the Sea Ram spun quietly, its sensors locked but silent. The entire strike group held its breath. For 10 seconds, both sides hung in that impossible balance, one false move from catastrophe. Then, almost anticlimactically, the K-8s pulled up and banked away, engines fading toward the southern horizon. The sea went quiet again, but nobody relaxed. The radar picture began to shift. The Venezuelan jets, once charging head-on, now peeled away from the formation. One turned east toward the mainland. The other lingered just a little too long, circling wide as if taking one last look. Bridge to combat. Contact 1 retreating. Contact 2 maintains altitude, 9,000 feet. Copy. Maintain tracking. Hold posture. The Ford's Combat Information Center didn't blink. Every camera, radar, and FLIR feed stayed locked on the departing target. Even as they faded, the systems recorded everything: their heat signatures, flight profiles, radio emissions. Nothing was wasted. Up in the sky, the Hornets kept their distance. Viper 1 to control, hostiles turning south. Speed decreasing, no visual weapons. Copy, Viper 1. Continue. Shadow. Do not pursue past 50 miles. From his cockpit, Viper 1 watched the smaller jets disappear into the hazy blue horizon. For a moment, it was almost peaceful, just the hum of engines and the endless Caribbean below. Then he caught something on his radar scope, a faint spike in emissions. Forward, be advised we were painted. Copy that. Log the pulse. No response required. The Ford didn't react. No evasive turn, no flares, just data collection and discipline. Minutes later, the Venezuelans vanished from radar entirely. The Ford maintained course at 20 knots, heading north-northwest. But the story wasn't over. Just an hour later, Venezuelan state television aired grainy footage of the same jets, claiming they forced the American carrier to retreat. The world saw propaganda. The Navy saw a different truth. The Ford never turned an inch. Somewhere in that calm, disciplined silence lay the real power of a carrier strike group. By midday, the incident was already echoing across international news. Venezuelan officials hailed it as a sovereign air patrol, while Washington called it unsafe and unprofessional. The truth sat somewhere in between, in that thin line between deterrence and provocation. Inside the Pentagon's morning brief, analysts replayed the FLIR footage frame by frame. Every maneuver, every radio call, Every second of that 600-foot pass was logged. What they saw wasn't a calculated attack. It was a show of force gone wrong, a political message written in afterburners and altitude warnings. For naval strategists, this wasn't new. These gray zone encounters are designed to test reactions, to measure just how close you can fly before a superpower blinks. The Ford didn't blink. The carrier's restraint sent a different kind of message, not one of fear, but of control. Anyone can pull the trigger. Discipline is harder. That's what keeps small provocations from turning into global incidents. The Ford represents the cutting edge of naval power, electromagnetic catapults, stealthy radar profiles, and a command network linking every sensor across the fleet. Yet her most important weapon isn't technology, it's judgment. Out here, things can go from calm to chaos in mere seconds. One wrong move, one proud pilot, and the world's most advanced warship suddenly finds itself one heartbeat away from an international crisis. The Venezuelan jets wanted to send a message. The USS Gerald R. Ford answered with silence. The kind of silence only real power can afford. Because the truth is, power at sea isn't just about missiles or fighter jets. It's about judgment, timing, and discipline. And the Ford showed all three. So, here's the question for you, my friends. If you were in that cockpit, watching two foreign jets diving towards your carrier at full speed, what would you do? Would you hold your line and trust the rules of engagement? Or would you take the first shot just to be safe? Drop your answer in the comments below. I want to see how you'd handle that call, and if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Hit like if you learned something new. Subscribe if you want to see more. Share this video with someone who thinks aircraft carriers are just big boats. And hey, if you want to go a step further and support the channel directly, join the fleet. You'll get loyalty badges, priority replies, and help us bring more true maritime stories to the surface. Just click join over on our channel page and get on board with us. Because when it comes to keeping calm in rough waters, the Gerald R. Ford proved one thing. You don't need to shout when you're the loudest thing on the ocean.